You are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Asanov, and let's see the headlines. Top U.S. officials have shared sensitive data with a journalist on a messaging platform, sparking concern. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says that Turkey is key for European security. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney promises to speak to Trump on own terms. Just hours before President Donald Trump's decision to launch operations against the Houthis in Yemen, classified information was allegedly leaked to the media. The use of the Signal application for such communications has raised serious concerns about information security.
President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some
US President Donald Trump launched a large-scale military airstrike campaign against the Yemeni Houthi rebels on March the 15th in response to their attacks on Red Sea shipping, and called on Iran, the group's main sponsor, to immediately halt its support for them. A few hours before the attack, it is alleged that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared details about the operation, targets and weapons in a messaging group, including to a journalist. The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, says that he was unexpectedly invited on March the 13th to an encrypted chat group on the Signal messaging app called the Houthi PC Small Group. His report omitted the details, but he termed it a shockingly reckless use of Signal chat. The White House say the incident was publicized based on sources obtained by The Atlantic magazine.
Was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
President Donald Trump told reporters at the White House that he was unaware of the incident and said he was not a big fan of The Atlantic. A White House official said later that an investigation was underway and Trump had been briefed on it. Democratic lawmakers swiftly blasted the misstep, saying it was a breach of U.S. national security and a violation of law that must be investigated by Congress.
The Houthi group in Yemen claims it hit Ben Gurion Airport in Israel and targeted U.S. warships in the Red Sea using a series of missile and drone attacks. In a televised statement, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saraya confirmed that the group has launched 2 ballistic missiles at the airport in Tel Aviv, identifying them as the Dulfigar and Palestine 2 hypersonic missiles. However, the Israeli military says it had intercepted a missile launched from Yemen on Sunday before it crossed into Israeli territory. The Houthi spokesperson also claimed to have targeted multiple U.S. warships, including the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman. The European Union views the Palestinian Authority as best placed to govern Gaza, according to EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. The comment comes after her meeting with Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa in Ramallah. Kallas also expressed the EU's condemnation of the resumption of war in Gaza, urging for a return to the ceasefire. During a joint news conference, she highlighted that settler violence and new settlements being built in the West Bank were undermining the prospects of a two-state solution, which she described as the only path to sustainable peace. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has voiced a readiness to advance Ankara's relations with European Union countries. Speaking after a cabinet meeting in Ankara, he said that the EU cannot ensure its security without Turkey.
Europe needs Turkey to help provide security. That's according to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who says that recent heated debates have demonstrated that European security would not be possible without Turkey. He highlighted that Europe's need for Turkey is being openly acknowledged, not only in terms of security, but also in areas such as economy, diplomacy, trade, and social life.
Avrupalı dostlarımız
As our European friends shape their policies on a rational basis, they also comprehend the importance of relations with Turkey. We see these as promising developments for the future of Turkish-EU relations. Turkey is ready to advance its relations with European countries and the EU in the framework of common interests and mutual respect.
hızlı ve ani değişimler
Addressing the ongoing war in Ukraine, Erdogan said that Ankara has closely monitored recent developments and has maintained a consistent stance from the beginning. He stressed that Turkey continues to advocate for peace, emphasizing that peace has no losers. He also noted that Russia's partial acceptance of the U.S. 30-day ceasefire proposal is a modest but valuable step towards achieving peace.
Today was released the European Parliament's Winter 2025 Eurobarometer survey, which highlights historic levels of approval for EU membership linked to peace and security. Notably, 66% of EU citizens want the EU to take a more important role in protecting them against global crises and security risks. Meanwhile, 74% of EU citizens believe their country has benefited from being a member of the bloc. This is the highest result ever recorded in a Eurobarometer survey for this question since it was first asked in 1983. U.S. and Russian ceasefire talks in Saudi Arabia ended on Monday with the results expected in a joint statement later today. The discussions were focused on a ceasefire in the Black Sea before a broader deal is reached.
After more than 12 hours, the talks in Saudi Arabia between Russia and the US concluded on Monday. A draft joint statement was sent to Moscow and Washington and is expected to be released on Tuesday. Delegations focused on a narrow proposal for a Black Sea ceasefire between Kyiv and Moscow before securing a broader agreement. It's part of Washington's diplomatic effort that it hopes will help pave the way for broader peace negotiations. A member of the Russian delegation told the Moscow TASS news agency that the discussions were challenging but useful. He also said that the United Nations and other unidentified countries will be involved in additional talks. Previously, the US and Ukraine had held talks on Sunday, and President Donald Trump held dialogues with both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Despite all the diplomatic activity, Russia and Ukraine have both reported continued strikes. Russian forces say they've also continued to advance slowly in eastern Ukraine. And Ukraine authorities say a Russian missile strike has damaged a school and a hospital, wounding at least 88 people.
New Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says he is available for a call with US President Donald Trump, but says the conversation would be conducted, in his words, on our own terms as sovereign country. Carney noted that while calls with the US President typically happen soon after taking office, he and Trump have yet to speak. The comment comes after Trump's threats to impose tariffs on Canadian exports and his frequent remarks about Canada, which Carney has described as disrespectful and unhelpful. Carney also suggests that Trump might be waiting to see the outcome of Canada's general election before making contact. Canada's upcoming snap elections next month have heightened tensions with the United States, worrying many voters. Prime Minister Mark Carney is hoping to gain a strong mandate against President Donald Trump's trade policies when the country votes on the 28th of April. Toronto residents hope for a leader who prioritizes Canada's interests.
Toronto residents stated that tariffs and relations with the U.S. are key issues for the April 28th elections. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, newly appointed and lacking prior political experience, called for snap elections on Sunday, seeking a strong mandate to counter U.S. President Donald Trump, who he claims aims to break us so America can own us. As the country gears up for elections, the Canadians expressed their views and expectations.
I would expect that whoever the Prime Minister is, whoever the leader is, that they stay true to Canadian roots, they hold their ground, and we don't give in to any of the tariffs or any of the nonsense about becoming a 51st state.
For me, health is very important, education is very important, and I couldn't have become who I am today without the support of subsidy, without the support of subsidy for school for me or housing for when I was growing up, like for me and my family. So whichever person or people or conglomerate can try their best to move those things forward, that's probably what I'm looking for.
Since Donald Trump imposed tariffs and threatened further economic measures, the long-standing alliance between the two nations has worsened, sparking concern about the future of bilateral relations. With the Liberals and Conservatives nearly tied in recent polls, Carney hopes to build on his party's rising support, especially in the vote-rich eastern regions.
Armenian Parliament Speaker Alen Simonyan stated that there were no expected changes in Armenia's relations with the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Simonyan explained that he did not believe any changes would occur regarding the CSTO and suggested that it was the CSTO itself that needed to review its existence. He also clarified that there had been no changes in Armenia's relationship with Russia, despite ongoing issues and raised questions. He refuted claims that Armenia had shifted its direction, calling them untrue. In December 2024, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan had declared that Armenia considered itself outside the CSTO and stated that the point of no return for the organization had passed, confirming that Armenia had suspended its participation in the CSTO. Over the past year, Armenia's trade with Russia had surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024. With Russia now making up over 40% of Armenia's total trade, this partnership is strengthening, but it also raises serious questions.
Trade between Russia and Armenia has surged, growing 1.6 times to $11.7 billion by the end of 2024. Russia now accounts for over 40% of Armenia's total trade, strengthening economic ties, but also raising concerns about possible sanctions risks. Russian Minister of Economic Development Maxim Reshetnikov reports that Russian investment in Armenia has reached $4 billion, making Russian businesses key contributors to Armenia's economy. During the first half of 2024 alone, Russia's share in the Armenian foreign trade increased from 36% to 44.4%. Interestingly, during the same period, Russian exports to Armenia increased by 4.4 times, reaching $7.5 billion. However, Armenia's increasing trade with Russia has raised Western concerns. With Russia facing sanctions, Armenia is seen as a potential transit hub for restricted goods, dual-use technologies, and financial transactions. Western officials worry that Armenia might be helping Russia bypass sanctions, which could lead to greater scrutiny or penalties from the US and the EU. Some experts are concerned that heavy reliance on Russia could put Armenia at risk. If Western countries impose secondary sanctions on nations aiding Russia, Armenia may have to balance its trade with Russia and its ties with the West.
As Western sanctions continue to tighten around Russia due to its ongoing war in Ukraine, Armenia's expanding trade and political ties with Moscow raises critical questions about economic resilience, diplomatic balancing, and potential consequences for Yerevan's relationships with both the West and its regional neighbors. To discuss these developments, I'm joined by political analyst Taras Kuzio. Mr. Kuzio, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Mr. Kuzio, with Armenia's trade with Russia now surpassing 40% of its total trade volume, Russia-Armenia relations continue to visibly improve. Is this intensity connected with or may have any bearing upon Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process?
Well, only to the extent that Armenia is a kind of a Jekyll and Hyde. On the one hand, official rhetoric for Armenia is that it is moving away from Russia towards Europe. Prime Minister Pashinyan always talks about European integration as the future for Armenia, but at the same time we have this contradiction that actually trade with Russia is deepening and growing since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, because Armenia is, together with, say, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, and maybe Kazakhstan, the major Eurasian hubs for the importation of Western sanctioned goods to Russia. And there's no indication that Armenia is thinking of leaving the Eurasian Economic Union and the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. And Armenia cannot integrate into Europe whilst being a member of these Russian-led organizations. So Armenia continues to be a major source of Russian influence in the South Caucasus at a period of time when relations between Russia and Azerbaijan have deteriorated since the shooting down of the Azerbaijani civilian airliner and Russia's very undiplomatic and very poor response to that shooting down. So Armenia continues, as it has been for the last 30 years, a major source of Russian influence. Nothing has changed.
So, Mr. Kuzio, given increasing Western scrutiny on nations that help Russia bypass sanctions, how might Armenia's growing economic reliance on Moscow impact its relations with EU and United States?
I don't think it impacts very much, sadly, because I think Western countries, European Union and the United States have basically ignored this sanctions busting by these four Eurasian countries, Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. I don't think they have been punished or penalized for doing this sanctions busting. And I don't know why, probably because in the Armenian case, you have very large pro-Armenian lobbies. The Armenian diasporas are very powerful, influential in France and in the United States, so maybe they prevent it. But I don't think that Pashinyan would continue to allow his country to be this kind of major infringer of Western sanctions against Russia if his country was penalized. And obviously, Armenia is being allowed to get away with it. I mean, it's not really being penalized. It's another example, I think, of Western double standards on these questions.
So, Mr. Kuzio, thank you very much for speaking to A News. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Armenia has taken another step toward potential European integration as its Parliament's Commission on European Integration approved a draft law initiating the country's accession process to the European Union. The bill, which is now set for a second reading, has sparked intense political debate, reflecting the country's complex geopolitical position between its existing commitments and the aspirations of part of its population.
The Armenian Parliament's Commission on European Integration has approved the draft law on initiating the process of the country's accession to the EU for a second reading. The decision to include the draft law on European integration in the agenda of the Armenian Parliament's session was taken by a majority vote. As stated during the Commission meeting by its chairman, MP from the Civil Contract Party, Arman Yegoyan, the phrase expressing the united will of the Armenian people regarding the desire to join the European Union will be removed from the preamble of the draft law. According to him, the objectives of the accession process include strengthening democratic institutions, the rule of law, and national security. Meanwhile, MP from the opposition faction, Hayastan, Armen Gevorkyan, asked Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Paruyar Ovanesyan whether there was an official reaction from the EU to this project. The opposition member of the parliament also inquired as to what measures would be taken to strengthen the country's security, noting that the European Union is not a defence organisation and that security issues of EU countries are discussed within NATO. In particular, he added that the draft law does not specify what is meant by strengthening security, whether it refers to the armed forces or law enforcement agencies. In response to this, Deputy Minister Ovanesyan noted that representatives of Armenia and the EU had held 2 discussions on foreign policy and security issues, and it has been decided to discuss these issues more actively. Armenia, he added, has submitted a second application to participate in the European Peace Facility programme, through which technical support is provided for security issues. He also reminded that, by mutual agreement, the mission of EU observers at the border with Azerbaijan will extend its presence in the country for 5 years. On this, Gevorkyan expressed puzzlement, noting that the peace agreement with Azerbaijan states that third parties will not be present at the border between the 2 countries and that this applies to EU observers. The draft law was proposed by a number of public and political organisations, which collected 60,000 citizens' signatures in support. The Constitution of Armenia allows the parliament to consider draft laws proposed by civil society, provided that at least 50,000 signatures are collected. Earlier, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan explained that this step does not mean the automatic accession of Armenia to the EU, as such a decision must be put to a referendum. Later, he stated that Armenia feels quite comfortable in the Eurasian Economic Union spearheaded by Russia, is interested in deepening relations with Iran, but at the same time, a certain section of the population wants to have a European option for the country's future.
Iran is optimistic about the swift signing of a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said. Araghchi urged both countries to finalize the peace treaty as soon as possible, emphasizing that the Islamic Republic is ready to contribute to regional peace and stability. During a briefing in Yerevan alongside his Armenian counterpart, Ararat Mirzoyan, Araghchi also highlighted Tehran's firm stance that all issues in the South Caucasus should be resolved through diplomacy without the use of force. The government of Azerbaijan formally submitted its instruments of ratification of the D8 Charter to the Secretariat of the Developing Aid Organization for Economic Cooperation in Istanbul, Turkey on March 19, 2025, officially becoming a full member of the D8 organization. Azerbaijan's accession as the 9th member of the D8 is seen as a significant milestone, promising to enhance collaboration and open new opportunities for member states to achieve the organization's goals. But what does joining the D8 organization mean for Azerbaijan's economy and geopolitical positioning? To discuss this, I'm joined by Cüneyt Dirijan, Associate Professor at Istanbul Ariel University. Mr. Dirijan, thank you for joining us.
Hi. I wish you a good, happy Ramadan and a happy Eid, and congratulations for your new broadcasting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dirijan, what strategic benefits does Azerbaijan stand to gain from joining the D8, and how might this impact its trade policies in the coming years?
Yeah. First of all, let me clarify one thing. Regarding the latest developments in the world economy, I mean trade and currency wars, and struggling European Union economy, geopolitical tensions and wars, stagflation and recession risks, including inflation and volatile markets, bilateral cooperations, trade unions like D8 are gaining more and more importance. And when we talk about D8, Organization for Economic Cooperation, firstly led by Turkey, it means we are talking about 1.2 billion population in the member states, together with $5 trillion economic growth, and it consists of 10% of the world economy. So it's a huge, let me say, cooperation agreement among the member states. So regarding that, I can say that for Azerbaijan, I think we can copy and paste the similarity of Turkey case, which, for example, the Turkey's gain in D8, first of all, for example, preferential trade agreement, which means which aims to lower trade barriers and increase commerce among the member states. Apart from that, for example, visa facilities and, for example, technology transfers. But on the other hand, when we talk about Azerbaijan, it's a great opportunity for all countries, including Azerbaijan in the first rank, I think, for the renewable energy projects and oil and gas partnerships. Turkey is also is very dependent, for example, for the energy, like many developing countries. So those are the main, I think, items or headlines or topics that we can discuss. On the other hand, for example, defense industry is also gaining importance all around the world in the first rank on the European side, for example, for the European Union. And Turkey as a NATO country, for example, and when we look at the latest development on the Turkey's defense industry, for example, will also contribute to the benefit of the member countries. That things, I think, will contribute also Azerbaijan economy in the first rank.
Mr. Dirijan, thank you very much for talking to A News. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Industry and Commerce says the purchasing power of Afghan citizens has increased over the past 12 months, thanks to a rise in foreign trade, which has now reached nearly $13 billion. But experts warn that major challenges remain, especially with a growing trade deficit. For more on this, let's go to Kabul to our Tamim Bahis.
The Ministry of Industry and Commerce announced that Afghanistan's foreign trade reached a remarkable $12.949 billion over the last 12 months. The ministry noted that this significant increase points to a rise in the purchasing power of the Afghan people. The ministry's latest trade figures reveal that Afghanistan exported goods worth over $1.785 billion during the same period. Key export items included figs, cotton, raisins, carpets, lead ingots, and a variety of precious and semi-precious stones. These products found strong markets in countries such as Pakistan, India, the UAE, Uzbekistan, Iran, Kazakhstan, China, Turkey, and Tajikistan. Meanwhile, the nation's imports total a staggering $11.164 billion. Afghanistan's main imports are diesel, fuel, wheat flour, vehicle parts, liquefied gas, cotton textiles, spices, oils, and rice, all crucial for keeping the nation's industries running. In contrast, imports in 2023 amounted to $7.710 billion, while exports in 2023 reached $1.884 billion. Recently, the head of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan briefed the United Nations Security Council, reporting that the Afghan economy grew by 2.7% in 2024. While this modest growth is viewed as a positive sign, experts caution that the economy still faces significant challenges, particularly due to the large trade deficit and the reduction in foreign aid. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's all for now. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more updates.